Hi guys! Hopefully you've received your printmaking packet of materials. And I just wanted to talk to you before we begin about what's inside this packet. So I'm going to take out all the contents. And I have two brayers, which are foam rollers that we'll use for our inking process. So I don't need those at the beginning. This is my styrofoam print foam. So I'm going to need to use this to make my printing plate, which I'm going to use to stamp. So I need that. I'm going to keep that aside. This is an inking tray. That's for my ink. And I have a container of ink that I want to keep the lid tightly on until I'm ready to use it. So I'm going to put my inking tray, my popsicle stick, my brayers. I'm going to put all those things aside. And my nice black art paper, I'm going to put that aside till I'm ready to print. And all I need at the beginning is my printing styrofoam, some sort of inspiration, a flower from around your yard or garden, any flower of your choice, and a pencil that is dull. So that's what we're going to need to start the process. Hey everyone, Miss Ruby here with another art lesson from the garden. Today we're going to be working with printmaking. So this is similar to a block printing process where we're going to carve an image by drawing it into a soft piece of styrofoam called print foam. After we create our printing plate, we can roll ink out onto it and press that down, and it's almost like stamping. So the beauty of printmaking is we can take one image and repeat it hundreds of times if we want to. So we could make a whole series, we could make cards, we could make patterned paper. The choice is up to you. So you can see with this piece, my inspiration was a marigold. Here I was working with a tiger lily. And today I'm going to show you how to work from the inspiration of a passion flower. These are in bloom in the garden and they're just beautiful right now. So I'm starting out with my print foam. And one thing I like to do when I first begin is to practice what it feels like to draw as lightly as possible. So I'm writing my name on this or just something simple. And I'm pressing as lightly as I can. You can see I'm not carving into that print foam. Then I want to press down a little bit harder and notice the difference. What does that feel like when I'm actually carving in? So I'm pressing down hard and you can see the difference. Now I can feel that and there's an indentation. I'm using a really dull pencil to do this so that it won't poke through the print foam. So you want a nice dull pencil. You don't even need an eraser on your pencil because this stuff doesn't erase, and we don't even want to try to erase because what that's going to do is carve into our print foam. So ideally, we're going to start out sketching as lightly as we can. And this is similar to other sketching lessons I've done with you guys where we press really lightly. So I'm going to be looking at the passion flower, and I see the general shape of this is kind of like a circle. And its center starts kind of with a circle. So I want to think about how to use my whole piece of print foam to create this image. So I'm giving myself a light outline that will be kind of the general shape of the flower. And I see it's kind of got a center point. From there I can think about this almost like a clock. So I see that this kind of comes down straight down almost to like 6 o'clock. In between each petal I also see kind of a triangular shape, so I can think about what those negative spaces look like, or the spaces in between, as I'm sketching what I want my petals to look like. But at first, I'm just really getting a general idea of where do the shapes go. Does this go down? Does it go up? Does it go to the side? So I see that there's one that points directly down. I see there's one that points up and just a little bit over. I see this one has kind of like a triangular shape in between, comes down. And I'm just getting an idea of the information that's in front of me and how to translate that onto my print foam. So I see that there's a stem sticking out from this direction, and that's kind of a fun line. I can include that if I want to, but I don't have to. And I want to be careful. I'll show you guys later. I want to be careful about making anything really thin. Okay, so we'll get back to that though. So I'm just starting out trying to get an idea of how many petals does this have. Does it have a ton of petals or just a few? What are the shapes of the petals? These kind of look like long almond shapes. And there's another ring that I can think about that's kind of in the center of this. This almost looks like eyelashes, so that might take up that kind of space. And then there's another even smaller ring in the center of that. I also noticed the flower's stamen and pistil pieces that are almost like a T shape. Come up like this, come over like this. So I'm just getting a general idea of the shapes that I see in front of me before I'm pressing down hard. So these are still really light lines. These could all be changed. They could all be adjusted as I go along. So once I figure out where I do want things to go, I can refine them a little bit more. When I look closely, I see each petal is not perfect. Some of them kind of turn and change shape a little bit. Like this one's kind of curving over a little bit. So I can refine and revise my sketch as I go along. Just figuring out where everything's going to be. I notice that this petal is on top of the other petals, so those will kind of be overlapping. And I'm really taking care to look at the flower and look at my drawing. Look at the flower, look at my drawing. When we're drawing from observation like this, the information comes from what's in front of us. And one reason I want to start out working from observation or thinking about what these flowers actually look like is because if I didn't have this in front of me and somebody said draw a flower, I might say, oh, looks like this. This is what a flower looks like, right? Boop. But when I actually look at the flower, I see it's much more detailed, much more intricate, much more interesting. Okay, so now I need to try to put that back just the way I was looking at it, otherwise the shapes change. So once you like where your lines are, you can start carving them in. And I'll show you what that looks like. That means I'm pressing down a little bit harder until I get that indentation. So I'm going to go over the lines that I really want, pressing down and carving in. And again, the best way to do this is with a dull pencil over the lines that I've already figured out that I like. When I look closely, I notice that this one is kind of doing an interesting curving, folding over thing where I can see the back of the petal. So that's the kind of thing that we notice when we look closely, these details. So I want to include those details as I'm creating my sketch. And you can do this from any flower or leaf or object that you find around you. So I started with the biggest shapes first, the petals and the general shape of the flower is the biggest part. And then I'm going to work into the smaller parts like those that little ring of kind of eyelash looking pieces that are just like lines that come out from the center. It doesn't have to be perfect or look exactly like what I see. I'm just trying to get an idea and use the information from what's in front of me to make a more interesting piece of art. So I noticed that those were kind of longer pieces, and then inside that ring is another ring of smaller, feathery looking lines. So above all that, we had these kind of T shapes. And these are the parts of the flower that allow it to make seeds and make more flowers. So we've got the pollen on here and the nectar. And I see these three shapes that kind of overlap. This one comes along like this. So I'm really carving these lines in. So once we get a good idea of the basic shapes, we really want to look for even more detail. So I noticed that there's kind of a vein or a line that goes down through the center of the petals. That makes it a little bit more interesting. Anywhere that there's a smooth part, you can ask yourself, oh, is there any texture, any kind of detail I can add? So we're getting a basic idea of what this object looks like, carving it in, and adding detail. So once I've finished my sketch and I really like what I'm seeing and I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and outline this with a marker or a colored pencil or something like that, something that I can see that's different from the pencil, and I'm going around it. And this is going to be my line to cut. I had that stem that was kind of interesting. So this is going to be my cutting edge. I want to cut this out because the shape of the flower is more interesting than the rectangle of the printing plate. So I'm cutting this out. And when I cut, I need to be really careful because this stuff can tear pretty easily. So I cut the big parts off first. This is a big part. I'm going to cut the biggest pieces that I don't need off first, and that allows me to get closer to the line that I do want. And then when I'm cutting, I always want to make sure my scissors point away from me, so I'm turning my object, or the printing plate, rather than turning my scissors, because that gets a little awkward and more difficult. I want to do this really slowly because, again, this stuff can tear, and if it tears and you accidentally cut off a petal or an important part of your drawing, it's going to be really hard to fix that. So I talked about including a piece like the stem, and this is something you want to be really careful with because anything that's really thin will break off. So let me show you what that's going to look like. When we're using this as a stamp or a printing plate, it's going to get a lot of wear and tear, and skinny pieces like this will break off. So think about that when you're working on your sketch. You don't want anything to be too skinny because it will break. This is pretty fragile. So I'm cutting out around the lines. I don't want to cut right on that line, my drawing line, because then I will lose it when I go to do my print. That line won't show up. So I'm cutting around that edge. And that's why I did my red bubble line, so I can make sure that I'm cutting on that line, not on my drawing line. All right, and now I've got my printing plate. I'm ready for the next step. All right, so we've got our printing plate. That's our styrofoam flower. So we're ready for the printing process. So in your kit, you had several sheets of nice black art paper. I want to use the side that has a little bit more of a texture, if you can tell which side that is. It's a little bit rougher. And I'm going to take my printing plate, and you also have some recycled paper there. This is going to help us keep our printing process really nice and clean so we don't get splotches of ink everywhere. You're also going to need your printing tray and your 2 brayers. One of these brayers is for the ink, so it's going to stay with the ink and the tray. The other one is going to stay clean, and that is for burnishing or rolling out the print. So I want to take the printing ink here, just a little bit of this goes a long way. So I want to get basically like a dime size or a quarter size dollop, and I'm going to put that into my printing tray. I want to keep this in the center because once it gets into the corners, I can't really use it. And I'm going to take the brayer that's going to be for my ink, and I'm going to start rolling this ink out. So I really want the ink to be nice and consistent, which means the same all over. So I see we're not there yet. So I need to roll up and down, side to side, and even diagonally to get this really nice and spread out. Notice though, I'm still keeping it right in the center. I'm just making it so it's rolling out nice and even and consistent. When I get a good consistency, I hear kind of like a sticky sound. And I see that it's covering my brayer completely, and it's pretty much the same amount all over. I see I'm missing a little bit here, so I could continue to roll. Once I have the right amount of ink, this looks pretty good, I'm going to find a nice clean spot to work. Okay, so you might want to keep your ink separate from where your clean art paper is. I'm going to take a nice piece of recycled paper, put my printing plate down. This is going to protect what's underneath it, and I'm going to roll the ink out. And it's a little bit hard to see because it's white on white, but I'm covering the printing plate completely. And I made sure that my lines were really carved in so the ink can't get into those areas that are really carved in. It stays on the flat part of the surface. So I want to make sure I've really covered my printing plate. I'm going to gently peel that away. Gently peel that away. I'm going to fold this sheet in half. And I'm smushing the ink inside, so now I have a clean piece of paper again. And I'm going to take this over to my clean art paper. And I can figure out where I want this to go. Do I want it to be right in the center? Do I want to create a print that has multiple images? So before I put my printing plate down, I want to figure out, okay, where do I want this to be? How do I want to compose this? And I'm going to take my printing plate and set it down. And I'm pressing it down, making sure it sticks. Then I'm taking that nice clean sheet of paper, pressing down again, and I'm going to take my clean brayer and I'm going to roll. The pressing and pressure of this puts the ink onto the paper. Okay, so I'm rolling over the whole printing plate, and I don't have to press too hard. I don't want to break the brayer, but I really want to make sure that all that ink goes onto the paper from the printing plate. Okay, then when I think I've got it, I can take my clean paper away and peel my printing plate away, and I see my image. Now again, the beauty of the print is that we can do hundreds of these. Okay, I don't want to print it again right on top because that will make my image blurry, but I still have a little bit of ink left, so I could try doing what's called a ghost print. So I'm going to set my printing plate down, maybe fold this again so I have the clean outside, set that down, and I want to be careful not to roll over my wet print, but I'm going to burnish this again or press down, roll over my printing plate until I think I got all the ink off, and then I can peel that away again. So you see I have a ghost print, which is like just a very faint image. You can barely see it. And when we go over and add color, this will create a different type of contrast. This has more contrast. This is a little bit more faint. So you have a few sheets of paper where you can keep doing your printing. we're working with white on black paper because it really shows up. So I wouldn't want to take my white ink and print on white paper because I wouldn't be able to see that. So you can do as many prints as you want using whatever paper. You could use some recycled paper. You can use all of the art paper that was in your kit. You could use construction paper. You can do as many prints as you like. And we're working just in white. And I'll show you how we're going to add color to this afterwards. So one key is to make sure you always have the right amount of ink. We're looking for that sticky sound, and it dries up really quickly, so I'm probably going to want to put a little bit more ink in my tray before I do a next print. So again, I don't want too much. I just want a little, like a dime size or a quarter size amount in the tray, and then I need to roll it out so it's really consistent, because if I don't do that and I roll onto my inking tray and I don't cover the whole print, when I go to do my printing process with this, if I set it down and I'm not being careful, I didn't put the right amount of ink, and I roll over it, I'm going to end up with a big splotch, and it's not going to come out clear. So if you're having this problem, you need to make sure that your ink is really nice and consistent and covers the whole printing plate when you are inking. Another thing that happens sometimes is that we think, oh, well, I'll just try again. It didn't come out well the first time, I'll just try again, and we roll over it again, and what we end up with is kind of a blurry mess. So once you print it one time, we don't want to go over it again with another color because it'll just get blurry. I also don't want to, once I put it down, I don't want it to move around because that'll create a blurry mess as well. So you want to make sure to get the nice, crisp, clear print that you roll your ink out really nice and even and consistently. You make sure you have enough ink. We don't want this to be sliding around. That means we have too much ink. So I want to get just the right amount of ink, and I want to cover my printing plate completely and consistently, meaning the same all over. Then I can take that printing plate, find a nice clean paper to work on. The scrap paper is pretty important for this so we don't get our ink everywhere. So I've got a nice clean paper to work on, my nice art paper. I'm going to set my printing plate down, take another clean recycled piece, press that down on top, roll and burnish, and then carefully lift my printing plate away. Okay. You want to be careful when you peel your print away. You don't want to rip it off like a Band-Aid because if these tear, they're very hard to fix. So, good luck and happy printing!